So shalom to everybody. My name is Rabbi Mordechai Yosef ben Avraham. I'm from Los Angeles. Right now I'm in the holy city of Yerushalayim, sitting with Rabbi Botton. Very amazing author, speaker, and it's just such an honor to be with him. One of the things, we're just having a conversation. We're having a conversation like so many people in the tradition of Judaism will come together and we'll contemplate the world's issues and different things and really try to find meaning for ourselves and for anybody who's listening. So I just want to go right into it. And so last week we met and when I talked a little bit about this issue with Gaza and this whole experience. Now one of the big, issues that came out in the news was that Egypt blocked the southern border, right? So there's two borders. There's the southern border to Egypt and then there's into Israel. So now most of the citizens who are fleeing, this crazy situation that Hamas has created for them, which is basically a living hell, Egypt is not allowing them in at all. And so I want to know a little bit about your background, your family's background, and what was it like for Jews living in Egypt, since it's like a big point of discussion now, and why do you think they don't want Hamas to come in?
It's funny. I'm paying attention as well to the reaction of the countries surrounding us, specifically understanding that Egypt is right there and has this ability to absorb, at least in the Sinai Desert, Palestinians trying to flee from danger, and clearly, a message from them was, no one's coming. We're not taking anyone in. Yeah. That this is not a direction for them. I guess Egypt can't really do anything publicly that's going to show support for Israel. Again, it's a Muslim country. The majority of its citizens are Muslim. Many of them are extreme, and they're not going to facilitate Israel coming into Gaza and doing what they need to do. So they can't really do anything that looks like it's helping us. Number one. Number two, a public statement from someone within the Egyptian government, put out that, why would we take in so many people and jeopardize our own safety or situation? They don't want to, inconvenience them too much. So those are two things. One, I assume, then the other one was an actual statement. But bringing up Egypt, I wanted to really speak about the fact that I was very upset and, not surprised, unfortunately, not so surprised to hear when one of the, Blinken, the Secretary of State from America, came in to speak with Egypt, trying to negotiate, trying to figure out how we can help the situation from a political perspective, calm down the situation that's going on. So I noticed in an interview, Sisi mentions very clearly that, of course, any time you speak, you have to start off with some kind of neutral or moderate type of statement. So he admits that, Jews were persecuted and suffered in other Arab countries, before the state of Israel. But in our country, the Jews were always taken care of. And I was very shocked at this because I actually happen to be of Egyptian descent. My grandfather lived in Egypt. My father and all of his brothers and sister, his one sister, they grew up in Egypt. My father would be about 100 years old right now, and so we're talking about before the state of Israel. This is all before the state of Israel. And again, there's a lot of information out there, several videos, educational videos that really lay out with a timeline the history of Jews in Egypt. There's a nice video, very short video. I'm sure there are longer ones to get into more detail. The Jewish persecution in Egypt. So it was it was sad for me to hear him try to praise his country as a country that the Jews were treated, exceptional, very well. They didn't mistreat the Jews. First of all, that's the barometer of how you relate is we didn't mistreat them. I'm sure they didn't have all of the best benefits either, but the claim that they weren't mistreated is unfortunately trying to rewrite history, and it's an affront to all of the Jewish suffering that occurred in Egypt. Now, aside from being really trying to sidestep the current issue, which is in 2023, 5 people were murdered by Egyptian policemen because of their association with Jews or being Jewish. 3 Israeli soldiers were murdered by a policeman who did a terror attack, killed 3 of them, and then a tourist group of Jews, Israelis that were traveling, had extra protection set up for them because of the situation from October 7th. So they said, let's have some extra protection. One of those police officers that were assigned to protect them started shooting at the Jewish tourists, and the driver, the Arab driver, was killed, and one of the Israeli tourists were killed. So you have 2 terrorist attacks from Egyptian police officers against Jews, against Israelis, And so instead of facing the current issue in that it's not safe for Jews and Israelis in Israel, forget about because of October 7th. Just today, there's always going to be radical Muslim Arabs that want to really kill Jews. So there's a threat to go into Egypt as a Jew today, regardless of what's going on politically. Always is a threat. And again, the appalling thing for me was that he was trying to just throw out a statement that he knows he won't be challenged on, because first of all, the Secretary of State may not be educated on Egyptian Jewish history, and so he's just not going to call him out on it. And so I'd like to call him out now on it. I know firsthand from my father and his brothers and sister living in Egypt. We're talking pre-1948, so you can't blame this on the Israeli government. This is all pre-1948. That they had to have nicknames that they would call each other if they would leave the neighborhood. Being a Jewish person and a Jewish family, so the immediate neighbors in where they lived, so they knew they were Jewish. But if they would travel more in the areas that surrounding them where they weren't known and already like treated a little bit decent, so there was a constant threat of danger to the point that they couldn't even call each other by their real names. They couldn't call, my father couldn't be called Moshe, his brother couldn't be called David, they had to be called William and other types of names. I remember William because the baby of the family, my youngest uncle of the family, Nathan in English, had to be called William, and they used to joke about it as they were, of course, not anymore living in Egypt, and we would hear it back and forth. So one thing to say very clearly, the Jews in Egypt did not have an easy time, not in the old Egypt, not in the new Egypt. They always had a threat of danger to the point where my uncles had to have fake names. Another crazy story, and I know I'm just letting it all out, but here it goes, is that, and it's funny, this is a story I usually tell when I'm getting along well with an Palestinian Arab taxi driver in this country, because I'm a talkative kind of guy. I like to socialize, and I believe to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, and obviously this person is coming to help me get from one place to another. The small amount of money that taxi drivers get is not, in my opinion, the essence of what's going on. He's helping me get somewhere, and I feel that that's a person doing me a service. So I'm usually very friendly and talkative with the taxi drivers, whatever they are, whoever they are, and I get a lot of interesting conversations. So what if it's going well and we're very open and really speaking, and of course when there's a real connection, you don't speak just about the weather and when it's going to rain, when it's not going to rain, you speak about things that are important to you, you're passionate about, and so many of the conversations end up discussing Israel, Arabs, Palestinians, what's going on. Sometimes I'm being told that if we would control the country, we'd be taking much better care of you religious Jews. I've heard that at least once or twice. So when the conversations going well, so I get into the mood to tell them my personal story and its message. And my personal story and message is this. As a person whose grandfather lived in Egypt, going back, we're talking about 150 years, within 150 years, till the beginning of the state. So on one occasion, this is the story, it reminds me of the movie from The Godfather, where Al Pacino is trying to save his father's life from being murdered in the hospital after he's been shot up. An Arab Egyptian living and knowing my grandfather, he spread a rumor that my grandfather was a spy. A spy, I guess, for Jews, for the Jews living in Israel, whatever the case was, because it was before the state of Israel, but there was always a Jewish president, and there was a lot of conflict even going early on in the 1900s. Still you have conflict. So he spreads this rumor that my grandfather, his name was Shmuel, by the way, was a spy for Israel. And so there's this crazed Arab mob of Arab Egyptians that want to lynch him. They get him and they're attacking him, and they actually began to stab him. Wow. And this is it. This is it. They were ready to kill him. And again, baseless rumor. They didn't think to ask, to check, nothing. No trial, no jury, no nothing. Just he's a spy, he's a Jew, kill him and ask questions later. That was the mentality from this mob of people. Now, it's interesting to point out that though these crazy, more, I guess, more radical people full of hate Egyptians were trying to murder this innocent Jewish man on a false rumor, a police officer, an Egyptian police officer that seemed to know my grandfather, this is the way it was told to me from my father, that seemed to know him as a good person and an honest person and not a spy, kind of stepped in and beyond just being philosophically, or if you'd ask my opinion is that I don't think there's anything wrong with Jews, we should live together peacefully, but taking action on that stance and belief, and actually jeopardizing his position on some level to face this incensed mob and risk his safety on some level. I don't think they were going to kill an Egyptian police officer, but certainly risk being more popular and being, or at some maybe even physical harm, coming straight in and rescuing my grandfather from sure death. And he saved him. But he was stabbed, I don't know how many times, but he was stabbed, and his life was still in danger, and they had to now take him to a hospital. Now, this is where the Godfather movie comes in, because as they're deciding where to take him to a hospital, there are not many choices, because any hospital that they take him to, he'll be murdered there also. So they had to figure out a way to save his life in a hospital that he would be safe. And I'm not sure in the end where they took him, how they took him, but thank God in this particular situation, his life was saved. And so the point and the message to my friendly taxi drivers that I'm riding with is that, there are good and bad people everywhere.
Yeah.
And, a bunch of crazy, evil Egyptian Arabs that saw an opportunity to kill another Jew didn't even think twice about it. And for that, you have to understand a lot of people out there do not mind to see Jewish blood spilled. And whether they don't believe in it or whether they just passively allow it, this is all part of an evil that has to be made known. People have to know when people treat life as if it's worthless, that's already a problem. Yeah. You want to justify, we did this, he did that. So the fact that he was put in that situation is already tragic and just speaks of the society that he had to live in for his entire life. And my father, until he was about 40 years old, had to live in that type of society. Constant threat, constant danger. But at the same time, this Arab Egyptian police officer kind of stood up and actually took action for what he believed in to help a person who he knew to be good. And so an Egyptian tried to kill my grandfather, and an Egyptian man actually saved his life. And so I owe a debt of gratitude to that person for doing what he did.
So it's ironic that like this type of story of duality, of seeing the good of a culture and the bad of a culture, and being the opposition of that culture. My mom told a similar story about my great-grandfather, and in a similar way, he was walking home from work, and a white male, this was like, I would imagine over 100 years ago as well, a white male just shot him because he walked on his front lawn.
Wow.
And because he walked, the guy just shot him, boom.
And what happened?
And so he shot him. It was like one of these shotguns that had all these little BBs, and he had to go to the hospital. And it just so happened that, and it was like all in his heart. It wasn't just like he got shot and it was in his heart. And it just so happened that there was a medical conference in Mississippi during this time. And one of the main physicians in America was there. And it just so happens that he heard about this situation of this Negro who got shot in the heart, and he was fatal, so he wanted to come in and basically show, and he fixed him up. And he went on. So my mom tells a story that even though there was this act of racism that happened, there's also people, this is also a white male who saved his life, right?
Right, yeah. I hear.
So is that duality?
Very similar points.